וזהו יביאו לבוש מלכות, 180. We're on page 180. Now we're getting to the... So it said Geut means that Hashem became Melech, he became king.
Geut is health.
Geut. Geut with an Hey is in modern Hebrew health.
Yeah.
Or actually more like safety.
Yeah.
And Geut with an Aleph means pride.
Where does Geut come from?
He wears pride. What?
Where does Geut come from?
I don't know.
It's in Mishlei.
Yeah, it could be. What's the word?
What? It's in Mishlei.
Something Gaha. Breut veGehut.
Yeah.
She said it. Okay.
So that's why it's called Kvish Geha. Because they built a hospital called Gehut and the Geha. Okay, right. Yes, so where are you going?
וזהו יביאו לבוש מלכות. What is the
Levush
Malchut? Right? What is this really? It's talking about Ubchinat Geut v'itnasut Or Ein Sof Baruch Hu. It's the fact that he decided to become king. Yaviu Levush Malchut.
Doesn't Hitnasut mean trying it on?
No, that's Hitnasut with a samech.
Oh, okay.
Hitnasut is like kitisa or naso. Naso et rosh. To rise.
Okay.
Litnasot means that Hashem's infinite light elevated. How does the Rambam call it? He calls it ala birtzono.
Okay.
It rose in his will. Okay, there's always a sense that in order to do something new, you have to rise. You can't do something new from being below. If you're talking about the story you just told about Adar, why does the Simcha have an ability to flip things over? Because it's basically seeing things from above to below instead of seeing them from below to above. And Simcha, what it does is it's poetz gadel, it sends you up. And the feeling is actually the highest form of fire that there is, Simcha. And it breaks through all barriers and it sends you to a higher place. So here he's saying the same thing. For Hashem to become the king, for him to want to limit his infinite light, to create the Sovev, to create the Mamala, all this, he has to wear royalty. He has to wear the kingdom. He has to wear the power of being a melech. ויביאו כתיב שבחינת גאות והתנסות להמשיך בחינת מלכותו יתברך בהתערות דלתתא תליא מילתא. Why does it say that they should bring it? It should have said. Hashem doesn't need anybody to bring anything. Right. It's there. So he says, no, it is dependent. The fact that his becoming king, it's like on Rosh Hashanah, that his becoming king over the world depends on our awakening. If in that state of Or Ein Sof, in the state where everything is one, there's no differences, there's nothing separate. We said that this state exists now, even, also now. That nothing is as if anything before him. So what would cause him, what would he be a king over? There's nothing to be a king over. So there has to be an awakening from below. אלא היינו מחמת שיומשך ויאיר אור אין סוף ברוך הוא הסובב כל עולמים בגלוי ממש בדברים הנעשים בהם מצוות שהן רצונו יתברך. משם יאיר ויתגלה אור אין סוף ברוך הוא ממש בגילוי בלי שום הסתר פנים לבוש להיות הדברים, בלי שום הסתר פנים לבוש להיות הדברים הגשמיים הם נתונים תחת ממשלת קליפת נוגה בטלים לאור השם וקדושתו נמשך ומאיר בהם. So he says that really is, we're talking about how it is now. We're not talking about how it was when Hashem created the world because that's not relevant. Usually in Chassidus, we don't talk about things in terms of what happened in the past. We're talking about a process that happens all the time. So he says, what causes this process of Hashem wanting to be king to happen? It comes from the fact that there's an awakening from below of a mitzvah being done. This explains a lot about why the Rebbe kept saying that there's just one act can change it all. One act can be the Mashiach. Why? Because Mashiach is really a manifestation of this entire process that we're talking about. It's like the King Mashiach. It's not just what kind of king is he. He's really an extension of Hashem. He's really bringing Hashem's kingdom into the world. So how do you do it? He says here, you do it by an act. You do a mitzvah. The fact that you do a mitzvah, that mitzvah by itself can become what what brings down the light of the infinite, that it wants to now become king over the world, and it's no longer kula kamei kelo chashiv. It's very interesting. It's like saying that, in a certain sense, in the normal state of affairs, Hashem is slightly indifferent in a strange way to us. Why? Because we don't feel that He's ruling. We don't feel that He wants to be king. It used to be, you read the Hashem of the Bible, okay, it seems like He's very interested. And now it's like, are you interested? Are you not interested? What's going on? I understand
from our point of view, not from His point of view.
From His point of view, He's sustaining everything. Nothing's changed. But we don't feel that there's a vested interest, and it's very interesting. It's called a vested interest. You have to wear the interest. You have to get into it. Levush malchut. We don't feel that there's a levush malchut in the world. We don't feel that there's somebody running it. We feel that, of course, it's all sustained. This is all Hashem. There's no question about that.
When you see Hashgacha Pratis Yom Yom, you do see that.
We say that, but that's still not being a king. What the king is in order to, help me find my sock. No bemet. I'm talking about a king that would really rule the world. That the human potential would actually be able to be used for the right things. And so much potential is wasted every single day. Just the amount of people that do something compared to the amount of people that don't do something. Or just looking at ourselves, the amount of time we do something compared to the amount of time we don't do anything, is just terrible. And so there's a feeling that there's kingship missing here. He says, this is because Yaviu levush malchut. You're supposed to bring him. We have to bring him. We have to give him cheshek to be the king. He says, how do you bring him cheshek? That you do a mitzvah. Why doing a mitzvah? Because it says that's a chiddush. There has to be some hitnasut. The hitnasut is like some kind of you elevate his spirit, as it were. Like the Maggid used to say, that what elevates the king's spirit is a talking bird. Why? Because it's a nosafachim. It's a strange paradox. A bird's not supposed to speak. It's just an animal, and then now it speaks. So it gives him a lot of enjoyment, which almost is like weird. But the same thing happened by Shom.
Novelty.
It's a novelty. And it's not just a novelty, it's a paradox. The more paradoxical it is, the more intriguing it is, the more interesting it is. And the more it gives him, but here it's not just some novelty that you bring him out of nowhere. Okay? That maybe raises his spirit. Here it's saying, look, even the part, I know how you saw everything. Kula kamei kula chashiv. From your point of view, you were sustaining everything. You're sustaining the klipa, sustaining the kedusha, sustaining everything's fine. It's all run. It's not like it's going to fall apart or anything. But now I'm going to show you a trick, a magic trick. I'm going to take something out of the klipa and boom, move it into holiness. How'd you do that? It's almost like a magic show. It's like mitzvahs in that sense are like a paradox. How did you do that? And the only one who can do that is a human being. It's like Hashem, because there's no free will. Because in order to do this novelty, you have to do something new. You have to change the course of reality. This wasn't supposed to be something that you do a mitzvah with. This was just something was under the rule of the klipa. And you did that. Oh, that's interesting. So you showed me that this is there has to be a renewal. This is, talk about avoida. This is the most far-reaching what we call anthropomorphism of Hashem that you could probably talk about. That Hashem needs like a king, like these paritzim. They need magic shows to get them going. That's what Chassidus is. I'm learning from myself. So obviously, I'm not trying to say something about Hashem. In the end, I'm trying to say something about what the weight of my actions is.
In Kol Zeh, there really was a guy called Achashverosh, and Achashverosh really did bring from Mordechai the Levush of a Melech. But also a mashal that's not real?
No, there's also the pshat. There's no reason not to say there's a pshat, but we're learning Chassidus, so we're trying to get out of it the symbol, it's also a parable. Like, apart from being a pshat that happened, the chiddush of Chassidus is we can also learn from the symbolic level what this means. But this is to say this, you have to be a rebbe. to say that this is what it means. Mm-hmm. But it's not so far-fetched when you understand that we do the same thing on Rosh Hashanah. We take something that was a klipas noga, a piece of a horn from a ram, and we blow it, and we say, oh, now be a king. It's exactly the same idea, but maybe we don't think about it, what it means. Why is it that by blowing a shofar, suddenly Hashem wants to become king? When you think about it in depth, you see that really what this is related to is the same thing that a king, an earthly king would experience, that he doesn't have cheshek. Same thing happened to David. What happened we've talked about this before, but it says that when David grew old, he wasn't so old, he was 59 or 60, and he was 10 years before he passed away. But he became old, and and the garments that he wore didn't keep him warm. So that's obviously a parable. That's a metaphoric language. What does it mean? It means that whatever he did was unsatisfactory to him. Because he had many failures. He was stuck. He was in a rut. So what did they do? They brought him a young woman. He said it wasn't a sexual relationship. It was just having a young woman around. It's very bubbly. It's like something else. Suddenly you're awake. Suddenly, there's somebody to talk to about new things. I don't know. That's what you guys are into. and that brings up a cheshek.
Why did he use all his wives for that?
Because they were with him already. He was already familiar with them. It was already a family. There's nothing new there. Again, it's a novelty, but King David, he's not like Chitzoni in that sense. He needs another person. He's very soulful. So he's not looking he doesn't need the sexual entertainment. That's not what he's there for. But he needs somebody who's different than everything I've seen until now. Different generation. So maybe back then the generations were still the same because 40 years wasn't enough for things to really change. But maybe it was different because, for instance, he grew up, when he was her age, he grew up with no king. There was no king yet. And Shaul was only king from the time he was 25. So as a young man growing up, there was no king. I mean, he knew the time of the Shoftim. He knew the time of Shmuel. He didn't know what kingship looked like. And then he created it. And then he says, how good is this thing? This monster I've created, is it any good? Is it actually doing anybody any good? So he brings in this young woman who's maybe 22 or 23, who's never known a time without kingship, and has never known a time not under David himself. And he talks to her and he says, oh, this is what a young person's life is like now. Secheshek. Suddenly I understand, wait a minute. And you can't really know that until you really spend time with somebody. Because he said, all young people are more energetic and so on. But what made you energetic? What made you feel that you could pursue your dreams? What made you feel that you were closer to Hashem? But I need to find out, like, in deep soul conversation, what this is. And that's what he had with Avishag. That's what they brought her for. You see, you have an impact. It's not just a job. You've actually changed the way the young people feel. You've changed reality. You need to feel that you're making a mark, that you're actually making a difference. And that changed his whole perspective on his kingship. And from that moment on, suddenly he awakens. He says, oh, well, if that's it, then... Because then before that he was indifferent. Adoniah will be king. Fine, Adoniah will be king. Who cares? But suddenly he wakes up. Suddenly he understands that this is not the legacy that I want to leave. Adoniah is not the legacy. It's Shlomo. So you have to bring it from below. בלי שום הסתר פנים לבוש, להיות הדברים הגשמיים הם נתונים תחת ממשלת קליפת נוגה, בטלים לאור השם קדושתו נמשך ומאיר בהם. So that's the trick. You take something from under the intermediate state of Kilipas Noga, and you make it into something holy. And that causes an awakening above. And that awakening, again, depends on these actions below, of taking things out of the intermediate state of Kilipas Noga and bringing them into holiness. That man will do these things. What does it say about the mitzvot? Who will chai behem? You could say that the chai behem is the chai chaim, is Hashem. It brings life not just to the person, but to Hashem, to want to be king. כמו שכתוב במקום אחר. אחיינו המשכת אור אינסוף ברוך הוא בדברים הנעשים בהם המצוות. But this is well and good when it comes to things that are mitzvot. כגון ציצית של צמר, תפילין של קלף ואתרוג, וכיוצא בין. שהתהוות מאין לישר גשמיש בהם הוא מאור אינסוף ברוך הוא הסובב כל מין, ומקיף כולו בהשוואה אחת. All this is good for the Ein Sof that comes into the Sovev. And that's to elevate the state of the world in a physical sense. But, so that's all good. So that mitzvahs do, because mitzvahs are with physical objects. They're with things. But they're not talking about the inside of the person. And that's something else. אמנם, קיום המצוות במעשה אדם אשר יעשה בגופו ומאודו, כגון בפשטת הטבית, ונטילת האתרוג, וכיוצא בהם שהוא המשכתו בגילוי האחריות מאור אינסוף ברוך הוא בנפש האדם ממש. הגם שההערה וההמשכה הזו היא גם כן מבחינת מקיף, מכל מקום אין הערה זו נמשכת מאור אינסוף ברוך הוא הסובב, כל המין מקיף את כולם בהשוואה אחת לבד, כי ההערה היא מבחינת התנסות לבד, שהוא מתנסה ממות עולם, and so on, שההתנסות מצד עצמו מבחינת הסתלקות אחרת, it's all very technical. רק אחר שמתנסה, skipping a little, רק אחר שמתנסה מבחינת המין כדי להראות מלכותו ונשאותו על העולם, הרי נמשך גילוי הוראת מלכותו ונשאותו יתברך, והוא בחינת סובב כל מקיף את כולם בהשוואה אחת, אבל ההערה נמשכת על האדם בקיום המצווה, עשה בפועל ממש, היא בחינת כתר מלכות, והוא בחינת בהתרה שיתרה לו ממור, וכתר של ראש המלך, על דרך משל מאבנים טובות שבהם בחינת דומים, שהוא בחינת תחתונה שווה ארבע בחינות דומים צורך מדבר, ואף על פי כן נעשית התרה וכתר על הראש להתענג וכך בגלל מצוות אשר עשה האדם שהם מלובשים בדברים גשמיים, מכל מקום זה נעשה מבחינת כתר התרה למעלה, דהיינו מבחינת עונג העליון, שהיינו נחת רוח לפניי שאמרתי ונעשה רצוני. והעונג ונחת רוח זה מתגלים בנפש האדם, בעשותה אחת מכל מצוות השם, ותתאמו תורה כנגד כולם, כי הלכות הן הליכות עולם שנמשכות, שהן המשכת אור אינסוף ממש בעולם. ואין לקדוש ברוך הוא מדע למות של הלכה. So the second part is, how do you bring down from the memale? And from the memale, it's the kavanah that the person has. That when there's a new kavana, that brings down the mamala. So and that's called a keter. And strangely, the keter you would think would be more soviv. He says no, the keter, because it's brilliance, because it's created in order to be seen, as opposed to the soviv which can't be seen. The soviv is just everywhere, you can't see it. It just sustains everything. So it's a new level of sustainment of the world. But the memala is already a different feeling. It's something that you see, it's something that you experience, something that's integrated into you. And that comes from the person, how he does the mitzvah. And not just that he does it.
There's not just one person who's doing this. There's thousands of Jewish people. So they're all making Hashem king?
But it's
and if only one person makes Hashem king, he's not king? He is.
He is, but it's not over everything. But the Rebbe didn't, it's very interesting that you would think from everybody has to do something, right? So the example in the Gemara is, if all the Jewish people would keep one Shabbos, 2 Shabbases, which are really two, we got Hanacha from what we learned in Parshas Yitro, that really every Shabbos is 2 Shabbases, so it's just one Shabbos. It comes from just one Shabbos, from that song from MVD. There's such an idea that everybody has to do something. But the Zohar already says that it's not true. It's not that everybody has to do something. It's enough that Knish Tachada, he writes, the Zohar, 10 people. And then the Rebbe said, really, it's just one person. Why? Because it depends on what the intent is in the end.
The intent is to bring Mashiach.
You say that we'll continue tomorrow.
What are we doing tomorrow?